It's a great honor for me to be participating tonight in this event. It's an extraordinary event to be celebrating one of the intellectual giants of our civilization. And so I first want to begin by thanking the John Templeton Foundation and also acknowledging the vision of Sir John that made this evening possible. Given the suspicion, even disdain among a lot of intellectual and educated people about theology, I sometimes hesitate when people ask me, what do you teach, to say theology, because it's a little bit like saying I practice alchemy or I study unicorns. And so I'd like to just give you a little story that a friend of mine, Guy Eaton, an author from England, told me and insists that it's a true story. He had a friend who was a theologian and an avid British gardener, and he had a new neighbor move in, and he was gardening. And so the neighbor came out, introduced himself, and said, what do you do? He said, I'm a theologian. To which the neighbor replied, I'm an atheist. And so at that point, the theologian asked him, have you read St. Augustine? No. Have you read St. Thomas Aquinas on God? No. What about Meister Eckhart or Julian of Norwich? No. Perhaps you've read some of the Eastern philosophers, Maimonides or Averroes or Avicenna, maybe Ghazali, Razes? No. Haven't read them either. What about some of the moderns, Plantinga or Kraft or maybe William Craig? Don't know them either. He said, sir, you are not an atheist, you're an ignoramus. So I think the anecdote reveals something about people today who glibly dismiss belief in God as inherently unreasonable. And yet, they'll say, I don't believe in God, without ever looking at some of the arguments. The same people, however, will believe in things like quarks and neutrinos. They'll believe in dark matter. And they won't know the science that substantiates belief in those things. They simply trust the scientists that believe in such phenomena that we can't see. We have theologians also that have their arguments for believing in the things that they don't see. And just like most people believe in scientists without really knowing their proofs, many believers, simple people, believe what their teachers and their philosophers tell them without having the proof. So we forget that the age of science is also an age of faith, just like the age of faith was actually also an age of science. And something that we forget is that the epistemology of trust is foundational in our world. In the classical period of Muslim scholasticism, most theologians actually argued that belief had to be grounded in reason. And for this reason, even young adolescent students were taught the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God, which is in our creeds, because they didn't want this circular reasoning. And so for most people, what we call the age of faith, right, is actually an age of reason. Theologians of the age of faith considered their works pursuits of science. They grounded their arguments in logic and argued not for evidence beyond reasonable doubt, but for the preponderance of evidence. And we forget that this is what we use in our civil courts to determine the validity of an argument, the preponderance of evidence. But atheists demand the standard of criminal courts, as if God is a criminal on trial. They want beyond a reasonable doubt, which would, of course, eliminate the element of faith, which is so essential to theistic belief. The great theologians of the past grounded faith in reason because they believed that human beings are created in the imago Dei, or the metaphysical image of God. And since the faculty of reason is what separates us from animals, the God in whose image we were created must be a God of reason. And let's not forget also that many of the great theologians of the past were also working scientists of their time and accomplished mathematicians. Almost all of them were first-rate logicians committed to reason. Avicenna, who in the West is known for medicine, in the East was known for his metaphysics, his theology, and his logic. And so the great philosophers and theologians up until Kant sincerely believed that belief was logical and arguable, and metaphysics, or what we call first philosophy, captivated the best and brightest minds of the time. Our species has an insatiable desire to know. This is evident in children who always ask why. And that is the great philosophical question, why? So children are natural philosophers. The metaphysical question is, why is there something as opposed to nothing? And while most children have that innate wonder and quest for knowledge, drilled out of them by what we call schooling. Some retain it throughout their adult life, and I think Dr. Alvin Plantinga is such a one. Philosophers to whom the world never grows old, and children to whom the world is so new, live in wonder. Tonight we celebrate a theologian, even as we know that designation for so many feels quaint at best. But thoughts about God will continue to haunt our species, or at least about the sacred. Either we embrace them, or else they thrust themselves upon us in moments of weakness by momentous life experiences, earthquakes, tsunamis, horrific hurricanes, witnessing the birth of a child, or a death in the family, or a wedding, or a sunset that's painted from a palette of 1,000 different colors of orange and red. Such experiences make us ponder why and about what cannot be seen. It must be so for a simple reason. We will always have to grapple with the why questions that our material sciences are unable to answer. So it is fitting that we are honoring Dr. Plantinga for his singular contributions to addressing the whys and harnessing his extraordinary powers of intellect and directing them to the pursuit of theology's handmaiden, philosophy, which for some is still in the service of her queen. We're all the beneficiaries of his enduring work that has helped put theism back on the philosophical agenda. Without a resurgence of philosophy as the rubric that governs our great human pursuits, we deprive our species of a holistic understanding of knowledge. In the past, philosophy meant love of wisdom, philosophia. But with modern skepticism, we should call many of those who practice today that they're practicing misosophy, an antipathy towards wisdom. Philosophy traditionally embraced all knowledge, divided neatly into speculative, moral, and natural branches. Speculative included theology, metaphysics. With moral philosophy came ethics, economics. We should restore economics back to moral philosophy. And politics. And finally, natural philosophy that pursued the empirical sciences that today have totally eclipsed all the other branches of philosophy. The great French philosopher Jacques Maritain argued that every scientific question presents a double aspect, a mystery and a problem. Science, especially with its extraordinary tools of late, can answer many of the problems that confront us, but it doesn't know how to explicate the mysteries. Science excels in explaining how a thing works, and it has done much to make our lives amazingly livable. But in its crevices lurks a dark side that envelops us in a Faustian bargain. And while the other branches of philosophy can temper the negative aspects of our material sciences fail to enhance the other branches in grappling with the why questions. And the whys are arguably more important than the hows. Why are our minds so perfectly adapted to understanding the universe with all its intelligible mysteries? As Maritain said, mystery is not the implacable adversary of understanding. Rather, mystery is precisely what compels us to understand. And the men and women of understanding must be honored. And not simply those who mine the fields of natural philosophy, of science, but also metaphysicians and philosophers and theologians, the poets. All civilizations have three main classes of individuals. Those who do, I'm going to Aristotle now, those who do, those who make, and those who know. Enabling some of them who know to see beyond this mundane realm, the visionaries. Men and women of action and industry abound, but men and women of knowledge less so. And the visionaries among them even rarer, the poets and the prophets who propel our species forward. All three strands are essential to civilization, but modern culture tends to honor the doers and the makers, and too often depreciates the men and women of knowledge, especially the visionaries. Dr. Alvin Plantinga represents at least two of the strands of this rope that elevates and edifies our collective humanity. Richard Livingston argued that in every age, the strongest force of these three strands fills the common eye and distorts the common judgment. In the past, religion was very often guilty of this, not giving science its proper due. Currently, science is the offender, who, like Bottom the Weaver, wants to play all the parts. We now have scientists pontificating about God, or more precisely about why he is an illusion. If we're to restore balance in our societies and foster healing, we must respect and revere the industrial, the political, but also the intellectual and spiritual. Each is necessary for our societies to flourish. It is a tribute to Sir John Templeton that he addressed this gross neglect of our times and devoted resources that are supporting excellent work being done by individuals and institutions all over. I'm always amazed at finding new people benefiting from the Templeton Foundation. I want to conclude by offering something that's part of the Islamic tradition. When we honor a great man, we have to have a poem. So you have to indulge me in tendering a poetic tribute to Dr. Alvin Plantinga. And I apologize to Dr. Plantinga for using Alvin, but Dr. Plantinga was very difficult to get into iambic tetrameter. So here goes. We face so much in this world, our world, it's hard to take it in. In reality, the truth be told, we only face our sin. A battle rages in our souls, and each must play his part. Some will use the head to fight, while others use their heart. The belligerence in every soul will end when we find peace, but fight we must with heart and head for this plague to ever cease. The heart, the head, so must we choose. Might there be another way? In Alvin's books, it's clear to see that both are on display. On every page he rules the day and does so with such ease, but a stumbling block for lesser minds is that daunting Plantinganese. May God bless this heart-filled, heady man. May his pen overcome their sword. May his truth live on in the books he wrote in defense of a guiltless Lord. And for those who deem his thought unsound or that his beliefs are odd, they'll have to wait till Judgment Day to have it explained by God.